Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you, MC, for having us. Really a privilege.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and it's been great to connect, and I've really enjoyed our conversation so far. So really excited to jump into this. Before we get started, can you please share a little bit about your background and journey with my listeners?
Sure, I think that's a great place to start. Really, I think today what I was most excited about is being able to share two things. I wanted to talk about how the schools and the banking system ultimately failed me and fails everyone. And I wanted to kind of transition that into a solution. What can we do about it to become rich in life? Usually one of the first things, if you're like me, that you would like to know about people you are learning from, is that they're actually successful. Just to give you a basic State of the Union, we recently started to put together my estate, my will, and so forth. It's kind of a strange thing to do. Admittedly, it's not something I've done. I'm 39 going on 40, starting to actually think about those things. And the net worth came out in the 8 figures range. And I think one of the most rewarding aspects of that is I also don't have any debt at all. And I want to get into that as well, because I'm a big believer in borrowing. So I want to talk a little bit about how we ended up where we are now as we get a little further along, MC. But, one thing that I talk a lot about through my platforms is not having been provided a formal education in school regarding money and finances and financial success and how the banks work. Interestingly enough, this goes way back into my early childhood. I was raised by an entrepreneur, by a really more of an IBO. And, my dad worked for himself, by himself, my entire life out of a small office in our house. And they really, in my opinion, shared some terrific principles regarding money. I was able to see sort of the freedom that gave him. They never had any debt. In fact, even my childhood home was paid off. At any given point, I think at most they maybe had about $50,000 in a mortgage balance that they had used to do an addition on the home as we were growing up. But, these principles were really valuable. I saw firsthand what it was like to work for yourself. I saw what it was like to manage your finances frugally. And yet, I was never taught what I now teach today. As far as the school system is concerned, it was a joke. I heard you and Buck Joffrey chatting about this, and I stand by it too. The current American school system, a lot of people aren't aware, actually took root close to the turn of the 20th century, back in the early 1900s, something like 1902 or 1903. Rockefeller actually founded what's known as the General Education Board. And basically that allowed for major funding to go into schools across the U.S. And it was especially active in promoting state-controlled public schools. And, the General Education Board has never been considered interested in encouraging critical thinking. And what you'll learn about it if you look into it is that its focus was really more on organizing children and basically creating reliable, predictable, obedient citizens. And that's sort of what they got in me. I was a bit rebellious about that, I suppose. But I think the system in general is really, it's literally built for us to work hard. It's built for us to borrow. It's built for us to spend. And in other words, I guess it's safe to say that it's built for us to fail, for us to lose. And it's just the way it is. There's not a lot we're able to do about it. But I think the best question is, how can you still achieve success in spite of that? And I think I found a really cool answer to that. It's worked really well for me. It's worked well for a lot of the folks that we teach. So that's what I want to kind of share today. I call these critical lessons that I'm teaching the 3 C's of banking: credit, capital, and cash flow. Okay. Those are the 3 C's I want to sort of stay focused on. And that's where my philosophies are unique. They're uniquely special. Now, I want this to be kind of understood that you can live a very financially rewarding life in spite of being undereducated. It's not a lot of fun to admit to, ignorance or really average intelligence, but that's where I would put myself, maybe even below average. I don't consider myself to be a highly intellectual person. I struggled in school. I didn't finish college, and I had an opportunity at the early age of 20 to get involved with another business. Now, I had always been an entrepreneur from the early age of somewhere around 7 or 8 years old. I can remember walking around the block and soliciting my landscaping services to neighbors. That eventually led into a soda business where we were selling soda pop to golfers just off the golf course. The golf course wouldn't let us on their property, so we would stand in the street and we would sell ice cold sodas and waters to golfers that were hitting the sixth hole. They didn't have a beer girl at this particular golf course, and we made a fortune doing this stuff. That led into my own paper route business at 14. This just kind of continued on, and when I was 20, I was struggling in college, and interestingly enough, I was coming out of a similar experience to a lot of people, whereby my credit had been destroyed my first year on campus. And I'm not sure what it was like when you went to school, but you maybe had a similar experience where you were, you were approached by a credit card company, within your first few weeks as a freshman. And I got to tell you, I considered that money free money. I mean, I blew through that $1,000 credit limit within a month. And over time, I sort of just expected it to go away. I had moved a couple of times and, missed payments. And I had absolutely no awareness of how credit would be following me. And so when I was 20 and I was invited to actually co-found a wholesale residential mortgage company, I was invited in because of my unique abilities to promote and market and build a brand. And so these older gentlemen who had a lot of background in mortgages wanted my participation, and I reluctantly sort of accepted it. And the rest is kind of history. We got into this mortgage business, and in 2000, it was the heart of the refinance boom. You didn't need licensing, and it was easy to be involved. Obviously, there was a lot of shady lending going on. I was able to see some of that firsthand, but I was never a participant. I was raised with a lot of morals. I never saw how subprime mortgages would be useful to folks. And I lost a lot of business. I lost a lot of business to people that I knew who wanted those types of loans. And when I refused to set them up under what I thought was a dangerous product, they went on to another lender and started there. Now, early in the career, we had to fight for business. We were out there hustling against a large number of these mortgage pros. And so in order to kind of gain more attention, we began providing education for free. And it was a spinoff to the mortgage company, whereby we were teaching first-time homebuyer classes, first-time real estate investor classes, started teaching classes about credit, about just lending in general. And they grew. You start with just a small handful of folks in the room, and suddenly you've got triple digits in the room. And when they began to catch on, it was really inspiring to us. We began to tap into this unique skill where we loved educating. And from there, we decided that we wanted to perfect and master one subject. We wanted to be known across the country as the authority on that. And the subject we chose at that time was credit. And it was partially because of the history we had, and we wanted to learn more about it. We saw the influence it was having on borrowing strength. And so we decided to apprentice under some of the pioneers of the personal and business credit world. And that was something that was a really great decision. We spent a lot of money. I'm a big believer in mentors. I know you are too.
Absolutely.
That was something that was really cool because it gave us the upper hand to really be considered experts in the field. And so by 2005, we were traveling all over the country teaching about credit. And lo and behold, I stumbled into much of what we now teach today, which is extremely powerful. And without going too much deeper into the last 13 years, essentially we've become leaders in one-on-one coaching for consumers and entrepreneurs and investors who are interested in maximizing their cash flow. And that is where we specialize. We specialize in people having as much money left over at the end of the month as possible, but we don't do it the way that I was taught to do it back in the day. I was taught by Dave Ramsey, and I have to admit that I've consumed my fair share of Susie Orman. I'm not a huge fan, but I do believe that as I began uncovering a lot of the information I was being taught, some of it just wasn't attractive to me. It wasn't appealing. I don't like the idea of scarcity. And so much like Kiyosaki on your 100th episode was talking about, shifting the mindset, that's really what led to our success. It was starting to focus on abundance and not looking as deeply into how can we cut back and sacrifice and give up things we love, like expensive coffees and expensive travel and expensive gifts and expensive donations, and instead have a lot more to do as much of that as we want. And so that is really where we have ended up now today, is we believe in abundance. We believe in having far more than we need. And we have combined what we learned through Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad philosophies with what we had heard being taught through the Dave Ramsey ideas, and have created this really neat kind of Frankenstein of each of them. And we fall directly into the middle. I believe that each of those individuals, while I really subscribe to the bulk of what they talk about, I still feel there's a significant enough percentage missing from their message that needs to be discussed, whereby they're each majority right, and yet partially still didn't cut the mustard for me, especially in a volatile economy.
Absolutely. And I love how you brought it all together, Matthew, because you started off with the school system and talking about this Prussian model that was basically adopted in the United States, and what it ties really into, as you eloquently stated too, about really getting good, in the industrial age, getting good factory workers, right? Mm-hmm. People that can do the jobs and work the machines. No critical thinking, no problem solving skills really taught, no resourcefulness, right? Or taught how to be resourceful. And then I really liked how you brought it all together with abundance, because it's so true. The entire school system and model, in my opinion, flows from a worldview of scarcity, right? The industrial age model of not enough, only enough, reducing, cutting costs, just enough for everyone to kind of get by. Where in this new world that we're living in, this mindset shift and mindset mode of abundance, I mean, truly in the information age, as your business and as you shared how your model has evolved, anything is possible, and there's just so much opportunity to grow your business and provide value for folks in many other different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably more than ever before. You're seeing that too. You've done a terrific job of tapping into that, and I love studying from the masters at that as well, because I find it just so fascinating. The Gary Vaynerchuk's out there. I mean, what an amazing spokesperson for the potential that we all actually share now. And so I don't have a high tolerance for excuses. I'm certainly guilty of them myself, but I look at the opportunities that are there now, and I believe that we all have equality when it comes to opportunity. I do think that results are not equal, and it is usually tied to the amount of effort you're willing to put in and the amount of consistency that you have. So for me, it was really just a matter of continuing to forge ahead with pure grit. Not everybody is cut out for entrepreneurship. I wish they were. And I think if people spent enough time just learning to gain the competence that they need to have confidence to move forward, they could remain consistent with what they're doing, which is another coincidental 3 C's of success, right? I mean,
right.
you're dealing with competence to gain the knowledge and the courage to move forward. That's half the battle. And it's not easy to keep putting one foot in front of the next when you're just so uncertain about what's going to come. I mean, there were a lot of scary moments being a business owner, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I feel that those who are still tying themselves to other people's decisions and other people's circumstances, they're taking a much bigger gamble. That to me seems a lot scarier.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I like what you said too about the opportunity that exists. Being from South Africa, one of the things that really struck me when I came to the United States in 2001 was just the upward mobility available to anyone that's willing to work and apply themselves. And now through the internet and this global worldwide network, I mean, that same kind of principle applies globally, right? Mm-hmm. There's just so much opportunity. The other thing that you mentioned as well is you followed sort of a blend between the Robert Kiyosakis and the Dave Ramseys. And I really appreciate that too, because we live in a world with extremes, right? And it's built into marketing. Absolutely. But there are ways to blend a lot of the principles and a lot of the concepts. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So going back to my landscaping business, at single-digit ages, I remember one of my clients, a neighbor around the corner named Mr. Sherman. And Mr. Sherman would sit on his porch while I was out weeding, and they had this incredible garden. He'd sit there with his little TV, smoking this delicious smelling pipe. I can still smell it today, even when I catch whiffs of it, in downtown Denver. It just brings me back. And he was such a great guy. He'd sit there and watch old VHS, reruns or videotapes of Jeopardy. And I just remember he knew every answer. The guy would qualify as the first genius I ever met. And, at the end of the day, the pay that he gave me really came more in the form of knowledge. He would pay me 25 cents an hour. That was my first going rate. And looking back on it, I realized just how ripped off I was. It seems almost like we were probably violating some child labor laws there, but he really came out ahead. And in the end, I realized that I did too, because that knowledge was just such an incredible type of equity for me. But what I did begin to learn was that I didn't have to know everything. I began to learn that the most important ingredient to me achieving success, because I didn't consider myself to be an intellect, was mentorship. And when I look around, I see a lot of people struggling with that, but I never did. I am a DIYer, so my instinct is to take on projects quickly without necessarily asking for help or reading the instructions. And that has more often than not come back to bite me, whereby there were corrections necessary. You end up backpedaling a lot and you end up needing to fix mistakes. And it's really expensive over time as well. But I identified quickly that, my instinct to do things by myself was ego and fear-based more than anything else. Looking at that, a lot of success boils down to timeliness and mindset. And when you're looking at the abundance mindset, nothing has ever helped me achieve success more when it comes to economic situations, more than having the right mentors and having the right state of mind. Now, when I look back over my sort of years in school, I look back at some of the computer classes I took. I mean, I was playing Oregon Trail, for crying out loud, and I look at what's now possible technologically, and it's impossible to deny that technology forces a form of shelf life. I mean, there is an expiration date on relevance. So people that are unwilling or unaware of how they can adapt are usually doomed. And you can see that through some big examples, like the Toys R Us's out there. But you have to stay relevant. And so this is why I think you have to build a fabulous team. And I look back over the journey that I took from age 20 until the first Great Recession. And, that was the verge of a depression. And there are many out there today that argue another is around the corner. And there are many out there today who believe that it has the potential of even being worse than the last one. There are many who argue that the last one really didn't recover. It was more of a Band-Aid. And so, I look at that and say, okay, well, let's look at those cycles from the age of 20 until I see the first recession wiping out some of the most successful people I was standing around, people that I admired, people I looked at and thought, I want to accomplish what they're accomplishing. And I think you even had mentioned at one point that you had experienced some of the ups and downs that come with real estate investing when there's economic volatility. And that's what I was witnessing. And those were the folks that were following Robert Kiyosaki's approach, at least to the best of their ability or their ability to understand what he was trying to teach. And I took away a lot of the same messages from those philosophies, which was, leverage at costs that are below the speculated returns that you'll earn from assets you're acquiring. And it's a road to wealth. And to me, that has so much logical, backing to it that it just made so much sense. It was just so commonsensical to me. And that's what we were doing. We were borrowing money to grow our income streams. And that was both through entrepreneurship and through real estate investing. And it was working until it didn't work anymore, until the market shifted. And all of a sudden we began to understand the dangers behind the debt. And all of a sudden the philosophies that I had heard Dave Ramsey teaching began to make so much more sense. And when he treats debt as a danger, I think he's dead on. And so the what I think is uniquely special about the approach we take and the approach we teach others to consider is that we believe that leverage and borrowing in order to develop wealth, that is a key ingredient, that it should not be avoided. While simultaneously, we believe that debt is incredibly dangerous and it should be treated not as the difference between good debt and bad debt, which is what I was taught by Robert, but rather that all debt is evil. And if you treat it as evil and you believe that the terms of repayment that the bank has requested you follow, the terms that you signed the dotted line agreeing to, things like 30-year mortgages, and if you agree on those, that you will be victimized by an insidious system that is designed to extract money from you by people that are much smarter than you. The bankers, I'm not going to ever try and convince anybody I'm smarter than the individuals from MIT hired to build amortization schedules for the bank. I'm not smarter than them. Why in the world would I think? If I go in and I subscribe to repayment terms, I look at those terms as optional. From there, I'm paying off 30-year mortgages as quickly as I possibly can, just like Dave Ramsey would talk about. The difference really is that I'm going to borrow money to gain access to more money, to income. And over the course of just the last 6 years alone, we used that exact formula, borrowing almost $500,000 in business-related leverage, not mortgages. This is mortgages aside, business-related leverage that allowed us to create somewhere in the neighborhood of just under $500,000 worth of contracts monthly in order to then pay off that almost $500,000 in debt in under 18 months, which now again leaves us completely debt-free. I love the idea of being both debt-free and having substantial and diversified streams of income. And I think the easiest way to do that is to find ways that you can use other people's money in order to build them out. It doesn't require $500,000. That's an extreme example. I do consider myself to be the anomaly in what's possible using these philosophies. So I don't like to mislead people into thinking that everyone's going to get the same outcome. But when we're comparing it to, listen, most people, if all they did was add another couple $1,000s to their net cash flow every month, the outcome of those results would blow their mind. They could literally pay off their houses in 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Most people, if all they did was add another couple $1,000s to their net cash flow. They can save usually hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of interest costs. People can set up policies using your philosophies of the infinite banking concept and literally begin to transition away from requiring banks in their lives ever again. It's gotten to the point now with us professionally where a lot of these debt weapon vehicles that we teach about through our YouTube channel, that we don't even need them. We have a huge stockpile of them to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, almost $1 million in availability, of which we don't necessarily forecast ever requiring the use of another again. Now, it took a long time to get to that point. And when I say a long time, I'm talking years, not months, but ideally less than a decade. And at the end of the day, we've grown away from banks, and I like to envision that for most people. As I know you do as well. I just think being less dependent on the banks is a good thing.
No, absolutely. And you've spoken about the 3 C's of how people bank and how they borrow. And you've spoken a little bit about debt weapons. Can you go into a little bit more detail about those 3 C's and also elaborate a little bit on the debt weapons that you spoke of?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the 3 C's of proper banking and borrowing are perpetual in nature. The first is that of your credit. So unlike Dave Ramsey's concepts, we believe very, very heavily in credit. We believe credit has tremendous power, and to ignore that, neglect it, or even mistreat it is a terribly expensive mistake. And so we're always starting our path to success by concentrating on a strategic plan to optimize our overall borrowing ability, our borrowing strength. We want to look as good to lenders as we possibly can. And our credit is really considered a financial report card. So most lenders are going to be interested in your credit history. And so we focus a great deal of attention educating people about how to optimize credit and get the target FICO credit score, FICO being the most important credit scoring formula used because 9 out of 10 or 90% of the largest financial institutions rely on the FICO credit scoring algorithm. That FICO credit score should be targeted at a 760 and above. So a 760 and up is really where we're focusing on educating people to proactively earn that score and beyond. The 700 FICO credit score is a minimum whereby we start to tap into this amazing collection of debt weapons, which is the second category in the 3 C's to banking and borrowing the right way, which is capital. Now, accessing capital is really where we're subscribing to the Kiyosaki idea that other people's money can help create wealth for you. And that's exactly right. I mean, when you look at putting money to work, it's actually going out and generating more money. So if you can borrow other people's money to make you money, you're kind of standing in the middle reaping the benefits. And so accessing these capital accounts, these are a form of debt weapons. And we'll come back to the expanded definition of debt weapons here shortly. The third C in this equation is that of cash flow. So it is my experience, having dealt with thousands of families. We've dealt with just north of 11,000 families at this point, and I spend no less than 6 hours every day giving away free coaching to people from our YouTube channel. So I'm personally on the phone for at least 6 hours a day, at least 4 days a week, discussing with one household after the next individually about their personal financial objectives and how to get there as quickly and safely as possible. And over that period of time, it has been my experience that the most important number to your overall financial health is how much is left over at the end of each month. People can make a tremendous amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, and still have very little or nothing to show for it. If you're spending as much or everything that you're earning, you're falling into the Parkinson's law category where expenses are rising to meet income. So it's not just about what you make, as we've all heard, it's about what you keep. So cash flow is developed by maximizing both sides of the balance sheet. We want to obviously grow our assets, and we want to reduce and eventually eliminate our liabilities. And so when you're just simply focusing on paying off debt, like you are with Dave Ramsey's strategies, or you're just focusing on leveraging your way into more assets, like you are with Robert Kiyosaki's philosophies, it seemed to me that each side of the balance sheet was being somewhat neglected, or not each side, but the opposite side of the balance sheet, depending on whoever's philosophies you're studying, was being somewhat neglected. And so it has been concluded that with these debt weapon strategies, most of the time we can accomplish both simultaneously. If I can continue to acquire new income streams and new assets, most of the time that has taken time. I don't just simply go out and put offers on properties every day. I'm scouting properties. And if we find a great deal, we may put an offer on it. And that might happen a few times a year. For the average person, maybe even less. If somebody wants to own 10 properties in 10 years, that's only one property per year. So what are you doing in the meantime? If you're just simply stockpiling your money in checking or savings accounts, all you're really doing is benefiting the bank. If all you're doing is waiting to put money as a down payment onto a new asset, and that money's sitting there underperforming, you're missing a tremendous opportunity that could be used and maximized every day, like eliminating debt for the short term. So what we're doing that's really neat is we're continually building our liquidity, where we have access to more liquid capital. We have access to more dollars when we need them. And we are, in the meantime, using a technique that we call paycheck or income parking, where we are taking our paychecks and we're taking our income streams, we're taking our rent checks, and we're parking them against our balances so that they can reduce the average daily interest costs on that debt for that kind of neutral period of time where really no activity is taking place. And by doing that, our money's working for us by and large the entire year. And it's a fairly simple concept. I think it's confusing because it's new to most people, and that can be a little tricky. But aside from getting past the confusion, that's why we mentor people. That's why we have a coaching relationship with folks that want to make sure that they can do it the right way. And I'd love to offer your entire audience access to the library that we have completely free of charge. You can just simply send them to the YouTube channel, which is under youtube.com/VIP financial ed, and just start digging in. The numbers are sure to impress. When I first started to see some of these numbers break down, it blew my mind. It still blows my mind. But it's important that each and every person that is listening, who chooses, they realize it's not an overnight process and it will require patience. And when you're involved in this and it's taking years to achieve one of your objectives, like paying houses off, we're talking about 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and it feels painfully slow when you're in the middle of that. When you get done and you look back, you go, holy smokes, that was fast. And when you see the amount of money you can save, because anyone who owns a home, whether it's a primary residence or it's an investment property, all you have to do is pull out a truth in lending statement and look at the total cost of interest that you will pay over 30 years. Most of us saw this at the closing table and immediately suppressed it once we left the room. We just shove it into a file cabinet, try and forget about it as quickly as we can, because you will pay very, very close to what you're borrowing. At 5.25% interest, you'll end up paying basically dollar for dollar what you borrow in interest costs. So if you're at a 4% interest rate, and you've got a $200,000 loan, you're paying 6 figures in interest. If you can keep 75% of that, that gives you the ability to have that many more choices with what you will do with the money. If you want to go out and buy a lot more $6 coffees, feel free. I just think that there are certain expenses that we can all agree we all hate to pay. We all hate paying interest. We all hate paying taxes. We all hate paying for insurance. But they're necessary. Let's just keep them as minimal as we can while not losing out on the benefits that come with it.
Absolutely, and position them efficiently. And I love what you just mentioned as well, because we speak about it all the time too. From a point of understanding, is it's very important to understand that a lot of people, we live in a society where we're very fixated on one thing at a time, and when a lot of folks fixate on the interest rate, they don't necessarily take into consideration the amount and the total amount of interest that flows out of their whether it be their personal and their business economy into the pockets of the bank. So I really like that you brought that up too. And just to touch on a couple of other things, Matthew, the liquidity system, which is part of operational efficiency, right? So I think a lot of people, if you're a business owner, you understand that operations need to be efficient, right? And they're always looking for ways to be more efficient and do things more efficiently. But when it comes to our personal economy and especially our finances, that's one area that folks just don't pay attention to, and that's one of the key danger areas. Because I think again, that 5 to 10%, let's just say if that's what people are saving. Unfortunately, it's not. The average savings rate is 3.10% right now. But at the 5 to 10% of money that's in play, that's where a lot of people are looking at just chasing returns, right? And leveraging money, as you mentioned, with the Kiyosaki philosophy. But it's the big picture. It's stepping away, looking at the very big picture, at all operational efficiencies, setting up your liquidity, and then also positioning yourself, as you mentioned, to expand your wealth. And that comes with setting yourself up to have access to credit and capital. That's a lesson that I learned out of the last downturn, that if I was better positioned and had myself better available to access more, then there's more deals and more assets that were on sale at that time that could be picked up fairly cheaply.
Oh yeah, no question about it. I also think people think too small. And I was guilty of that too, where if people really are chasing those small margins, it almost reminds me of coupon cutting. And I just sort of like people to think bigger. And I needed mentorship in order for me to actually do the same. And it all started primarily with self-love. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think I loved myself enough initially to create the wealth I deserved. And once I began to receive proper training and mentorship about self-love, everything started to shift. Efficiency became so much easier. I respected my time a lot more, first of all. And once you begin to value your time, there's no reason in the world that you shouldn't have the attitude that is taught about in the movie The Edge, right? What one man can do, another man can do. Anthony Hopkins said he's a billionaire in that movie. And I just thought, I think that's so true. Unless you're Jeff Bezos, I think you can always look for ways of creating, a maximum trajectory where you really feel like you're swimming downstream. It starts to almost become easy. And I know that sounds really hard if you're not there yet, and almost seems sort of like fantasy. But that's been my experience. And I think it's totally true. And when you do that, I stopped caring as much about the hundreds and the thousands of dollars that I could potentially save if I were to sit down and really dissect something for many hours. And it's no different, like I said, than sitting on the ground and cutting out, coupons so you can save $95 on 100 tubes of toothpaste. I think that's so stupid. Why would you do that? There's zero value of your time. So instead, I began really turning my attention to ways of developing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of dollars with the same time commitment. And that really boiled down to the idea that you could really focus on yourself, focus on what you could do to entrepreneurially expand versus just looking at what something might be able to do for you as a solution. I have a lot of folks coming in from my YouTube channel that get really excited about real estate. I love real estate. We talk a lot about real estate on the channel. Seems you love real estate. You've been through the ups and the downs of real estate as well. But even those of us that have gone through the downs where it wasn't a lot of fun, we usually still like real estate. And so you look at, what's possible in real estate. And I have folks coming in that have really minimal starting cash flow positions from time to time, where they're at a $500 or $600 or $700 per month leftover net cash flow. And they want to invest in real estate. And I look at that and I doubt it. I'm the skeptic in that conversation. I personally don't think real estate makes a great solution for most people. I think real estate makes a terrific investment for people who are already out achieving great success. And if I were to go to, say, a television program like Shark Tank and stand before the sharks and bring up the fact that at one point just a few years ago, we were facing several $100,000, almost $500,000 worth of business-related debt, I can only imagine the faces I would get from them. That it would not be favorable. And yet it always made sense to me because I looked at it compared to our real estate investing. And in order to get $500,000 worth of mortgage debt in Denver now, you're pretty much getting, 1.25 properties at this point. You're not even getting 2 full houses. And somehow that's acceptable in order to generate $500 a month in cash flow. And when we want to take out $500,000 in business related leverage, we're able to grow it to almost $5 million, $5.8 million projected over the next 12 months alone, just using the concept of the YouTube platform. That YouTube channel alone that I discussed is going to bring in close to $6 million over the next 12 months. To me, that is a shining example of what we all have the capability of doing anymore. And really, I think it just boils down to, core principles of how you're going to go about making it happen. You've got to understand what your strengths are, and then you can look at bringing tremendous value to the marketplace based on your strengths, and you will be paid accordingly. So, I think that's really why we've ended up where we are here today. I don't necessarily think one answer or another is going to solve every problem for somebody, but I do want people to look at how they can maximize their efficiency, just like you've alluded to.
That is such a great way of putting it, because this is something that I talk about quite a bit as well, of how, just as you mentioned, one blanket answer does not work for everyone. I was just recently asked too about some of the strategies that we do. Again, people always bring up Dave Ramsey, right, as opposed to some of the strategies with Dave. And my answer was just simply, listen, it all depends. It's all relative, because everyone is in a different situation. So depending on their situation, where they are on their journey, their educational level, their financial level of education and so forth, then you dive into what they need to do, right? If someone, for example, is a complete financial mess, there's phenomenal strategies that Dave will get your house in order. And that person would not be a good fit for some of the strategies that we've shared on the show, right? That'll actually lead to probably bankruptcy.
Absolutely. Same with me. If you don't have your financial ducks in a row, what I teach is not for you.
Yep. Exactly. So really appreciate that answer, Matthew. Now, can you share a little bit more just what VIP Financial does and some of the other resources that you guys have? I know that you've mentioned the YouTube channel, which I would highly recommend anyone listening to this, check it out. I spent quite a number of hours on it just preparing for our talk today. There's so much powerful information out there.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And like I said, I just consider myself to be an average person who has proactively and deliberately set and achieved intentions. And I think anybody can do it who wants to take the time. You become what you learn. You become what you know. So if you say you care about money, but you're not actually out studying what's possible with money, then you really don't care about money. You like the idea of money. You like the idea of what it can bring to you. So as far as VIP is concerned, again, we've been around a really long time. The company was formally started back in the very beginning of 2000, and we've just grown and adapted and changed since then. As far as our value proposition, we like to educate, and we like to educate for free. And that's why we created the YouTube channel. Prior to that, we were teaching only live audiences. And we finally began to adapt ourselves and realize that the world was trending more towards video, and started a channel back in 2011 and grew it really slowly for a number of years. Come the end of 2016, going into 2017, and for the last 18 plus months, we've been very focused on bringing our content to the internet. And our channel has since grown from what was 7,500 subscribers back in December of 16 to now almost 125,000. And we're just so honored and grateful for that. But it shows you that there are a lot of folks who really are thinking similarly to what you and I have clearly defined as kind of our birds of a feather situation. And I love being able to go on there and pass along what I'm learning along the way. And I'm constantly learning as well. And people like you, you have a unique vantage point, as do I, because we're sort of a hub of information where people come to us and share information with us that we otherwise wouldn't have gotten if we weren't in this position. And we're able to then leverage that information across our entire communities. And that's such a privilege. So that's what we do there on YouTube, is we share everything that we learn. We don't hold anything back. As you begin to learn, it can become overwhelming, because it becomes painfully obvious that we're never going to learn it all. None of us are. And again, that kind of goes back to the whole concept of mentorship and being able to rely on other people. I don't consider my staff employees. They're collaborators. They're mentors. When I hire people, I spend as much time asking questions as I do training them. I couldn't have accomplished even a small fraction of what I have so far in life without having a terrific team. So in order to provide this type of support, I believe, as consumers and as budding entrepreneurs and investors, we chose not to go through the process of building out a program or a product where we could virtually sell something and really be hands off. We chose to go the more difficult route, which was through that one-on-one coaching. And while it's a lot more difficult, we're forced to charge more for it because we have to support our overhead in doing it. We actually work with our members currently over a very extended period of time. Every member that's currently getting involved is getting involved at 30 months. So it's a long relationship. And for that reason, along with several others, what we sell is not a good fit for most people. I like to be extremely transparent about that. I also think it helps prepare people to avoid disappointment, because we turn away more people than we allow in. We have a capacity. We don't have an unlimited supply because we're dealing with people one-on-one. So a lot like your dentist or your chiropractor, there's only so much room here. And we like to keep it that way. So right now we do provide one free coaching session, which I'd like to give to every one of your listeners as well. If your listeners want to take advantage of a one-on-one coaching session, I will commit to doing that coaching session myself personally. That's up to 60 minutes. Usually it's closer to 45, whereby we take a close look at where things are today. Where do we want to end up over the short and long term? And how do we rearrange some of what we're doing in order to accelerate that progress? And I'll do the best I can with the capabilities of one conversation. Now, as a financial coach yourself, you're fully aware that the real value I provide is over the extended period of lots of important decisions being made. That's why ongoing coaching is a necessity for people. So it doesn't have to be with me. I'll certainly be happy to get people started. But the real value that myself or anyone provides regarding money and really making sure people are confident in their choices is being able to ask for new, experienced perspectives anytime an important choice is upon us. So go ahead and reserve your free coaching session if you'd like that. That is going to be under the website freecoachingcalendar.com. Please know that the waiting list for those has grown substantially right now. I think it's at between 9 and 10 months. So I apologize in advance for a long wait. There is one way to skip the wait. If you guys are in a period of life where you're saying, I'm sick and tired of being where I am, I'm not feeling like I have enough to show for all the hard work I've put in, then you can skip the line and you can become a paying coaching member. And you can take one of our quick start vacancies, which comes at the best price point. It does not guarantee that you will be accepted as a member. All that does is it jumps you to the front of the line. I will still carve out my own personal 45 to an hour in order to evaluate compatibility. And from there, if it's not a fit based on your decision or based on our decision, we void the membership and refund the tuition. So there's never any risk to our program. We also do provide a refund guarantee to our coaching members because we stand behind what we talk about. And I think that's really important for businesses to do. And I think far too few of them do it. With that in mind, I also wanted to give each and every one of your audience members a copy of what's called the Cash Flow Cruncher. And that is a phenomenal tool. It's one of the most comprehensive financial spreadsheets I've ever seen related to the 3 C's we talked about. So it will include data in the spreadsheet that allows us to formalize a game plan related to your credit, accessing the right types of capital, and being able to maximize cash flow. And it will actually quantify your cash flow for you. You simply put in your various income streams, put in your various expenses, and voila, you'll have this amazing summary. So you can receive that as well by simply visiting cashflowcruncher.com. That's CRUNCHER, cashflowcruncher.com. And that is a gift from us to your listeners. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that has joined us for this and for having us on. I think you do terrific work, MC, and I hope you continue doing what you're doing because you're changing lives.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for making that available to our listeners. Now, a core message in our show is to leave our families and communities and the world better than we found it by passing down a mindset, values, and principles to future generations, not just money. So, Matthew, if you cannot pass on any money to future generations and we're only allowed to pass on 3 principles to them to build wealth and achieve happiness and success, what would they be?
Well, I thought a lot about this, and I think it starts with yourself. I think being able to sell yourself, loving yourself enough to believe that you are worth it, and having that confidence is an incredibly important piece to salesmanship. I think if you are not studying and learning how to be a master salesperson, you are falling short of your potential. That would be number 1. Number 2, I think you need to spend as much time as you can with people that are living your dream life. And I think you need to spend as little time as possible with people that are living a life you don't want. And that falls into the having a mentor category, having multiple mentors, while spending time with those folks, asking questions and developing a true friendship whereby your ability to exchange value with them becomes possible. And when you are capable of selling yourself and continuing to work and refine yourself, you will have value to bring to them. And that really leads me into the final principle, which is being able to use the power of leverage correctly. Not just money, but leveraging your time, leveraging your resources, leveraging technology, and of course, leveraging money. You will be able to shortcut your way to success once you have, and those would be the 3 principles that I would leave your audience with.
Fantastic. Well, Matthew, this was a blast. And as always, it's great to connect, my friend. And thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey and your knowledge and providing so much value for my listeners. And thank you so much again for making all of those gifts and resources available for my listeners as well.
It was a pleasure. I appreciate you, MC. Thanks a lot.